thank you for showing up here at the Healthy Forest breakout. There's plenty of chairs over here if you're in need of a chair. You can roll them where you need them.
Footstools? Oh, whoa.
Watch out. We'll just do a little bit of an introduction here in terms of our work in healthy forests. Are you ready to do this?
Sure.
All right. Use the mic. I think you might have to stand up in front of the table. Say a little bit about why you're here in a forestry situation.
So I grew up in Iowa, farm kid. Met Linda. We moved to northern Minnesota. We got married first.
Okay.
And there wasn't much farming up in the North Woods, so I got involved in forestry, and I became a contractor with the U.S. Forest Service planting trees. And so over a period of about 5 or 6 years, we hand planted over 1 million trees up in Superior National Forest. And one year I made $10,000 and I bought 40 acres of northern Minnesota. And then I got involved I bought a sawmill, and I became active in the hardwood lumber markets, and we were selling hardwood lumber through brokers, but it was shipped around the world. The American elm that used to be real popular was very valuable in England for furniture. The black ash of northern Minnesota was a dead ringer for Japan, and so that was really valuable. And ended up in North Dakota chasing American elm. And so then I'm kind of walking you through my career here, but and as things change, I don't know how many times I had to reinvent what I was doing, but my tree planting skills and abilities showed up again after the '97 flood in Grand Forks, North Dakota on the Red River. There was a huge effort to reforest the non-forested floodplain and tributaries. And so I spent about 20 years doing reforestation work in the Red River Valley. And at the same time, seasonally harvesting logs and lumber, and then kind of where I end up now in Minnesota, in Bemidji. I serve on the Minnesota Forest Resources Partnership Board, and I'm highly engaged in the conversation about where the forestry industry is at and where we're going.
Great. So this interest in forest is a long time in the development. We're, as you think about this kind of work in your chapter, for work related to healthy forests, I think there's a lot of opportunities for grassroots, or seems like we should call it tree roots organizing. A lot of these things are really local, and local grassroots is a great place to engage. I think what we'll talk about first here is really thinking about how do you connect to those grass tops, the decision makers, the leaders, state by state, as that relates to healthy forests. And I'm hoping that there's plenty of interaction with the with all of you who are doing this work in your chapters too. So this is tree cover for the United States. I don't have the delineation of the North Wind area, but you know approximately where it is. There's not a lot of forest in the as a percentage of land area in this region. In some ways, maybe you wonder how important is this policy area? And I think when Brad and I were talking about it, Brad said, all the more reason, right, that we preserve the forests that there are there. And also what a great difference it makes. I mean, the forests exist in these states along rivers and streams and in the communities where they make a big difference for in terms of cooling, right? So making it more comfortable for humans, making it possible for a lot of wildlife, providing corridors for wildlife. So I guess I encourage you to find out who in your chapters are interested in engaging in the healthy forest work. I'm going to just flip back to a little note page I have. So when we think about the Grasstops engagement, each of the states has an agency that's responsible for forestry in those states. How many of you have looked that up for your state? Just curious, yeah. So there are some resources there. As I said, in these states with relatively little public land, relatively little forest land, one of the big priorities of those agencies is helping people who have woodlands to manage their own private woodlands and supporting the community forest trees and communities. Some states have advisory commissions and councils or organizations that review grants and applications for grants. That's sort of a way to be involved in these conversations. And then two organizations, the National Association of State Foresters and the Climate Forest Working Group, have some really clear policies. So, and the National Forest Association of Foresters, here's their website, where we stand, and there's a policy statement. And one of those is on climate change. So there's language here that represents what do the state foresters say about these various issues, including climate change. There's also this, the Forest Climate Working Group policy, and Jad, what's his name? Jad Daly has been approved to enter at CCL. He's on the board of directors for this organization. I'm happy to provide links or share my little collection of links to anyone. Just let me know you want that and I'll email that to you. My point here is simply to say that foresters across the country recognize the role that forests play in climate protection and recognize that climate change is a threat to their forests. Brad's been friends with the North Dakota state forester for a number of years, and well, another thing you can do if you develop relationships with folks like these state foresters is invite them along to a lobby meeting. Tom Clays from North Dakota was in on a meeting with, was when we were asking for the Growing Climate Solutions Act as a supporting ask. And he was able to say, absolutely, climate change is the number one risk to the forests. So then that's what gets billed as the national language, right? And I don't know exactly how the Association of State Foresters talks about that. I think I could say another piece about that. In many of these states, foresters, and Minnesota's a little bit of an outlier because it's got significantly more forest than the other four states. But especially in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa, the people who are advocating for forests, whether those are wildlife managers or water quality, conservation folks working for water quality, or forests for forest production, they are happy to have allies to help amplify their message about how important those forests are. That's true in Minnesota too, but certainly found that to be true in North Dakota. So I thought we would just spend a little bit of time here taking a look at the language that some of these states use to talk about what they say about forest and climate. And I'm so impressed with the way Iowa puts their state action plan. Every state has a forest action plan. If you want to look for it, just Google that, your state's name and then the forest action plan, and you'll find it. Iowa puts it together in this cool story map format here. And under the Looking to the Future tab, it has several sections. And those of you who were in the breakout that Mindy led here this morning, we were doing a little exercise to sort of connect to the wonder of nature and connect to the wonder of the place, right? So this is what Iowa says about trees and green and blue spaces. Act as a salve to the human spirit. Positive benefits of trees and natural places are difficult to quantify, but they affect things like the incidence of type 2 diabetes, the children suffering from ADHD are able to better focus after time in nature. It's good for people's mental and physical health. It reduces crime. It facilitates social cohesion, right? So sometimes, and certainly in Iowa, this is the case, right? The climate arguments are down the list a little ways, but these are perfectly good reasons to advocate for forest. Their next section is about environmental education. And then they go to trees, forests, and water quality. And that is this is a very common motivation for people to protect forests and to plant forests, right? Is to keep water quality, to protect water quality and to improve water quality. So sometimes it's CCL also teaches us to, sort of find the common ground, and it doesn't really matter what the motivation is for why you care about forests. Whatever you care about, that's good enough. That'll help protect forests. Then the next one includes air quality. And these all have plenty of language around them. But what are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the list now when we get to carbon storage and sequestration. My guess is that this is an intentional decision to put these in order of what makes the most, what do people care about the most, right? And that's all okay. That's all okay. This one does this is the Iowa Forestry Plan, and it does a good job of sort of defining what do we mean by carbon sequestration And what do we mean by carbon storage as that happens in a forest? And how can we manage for each of those processes? The uptake, the sequestration, as well as the storage. So I encourage you to, if this is something that you're interested in, take advantage of documents like this, help to amplify the voice of the foresters and the foresters' allies in those communities to using their language. This is the North Dakota Action Plan. Also a really beautiful action plan, just not in that story map form. So, Brad, is there anything in here that you'd like to highlight? I know you're.
I think you're doing a fine job.
Okay. Well, you'll see here in the North Dakota one, and this is probably true in many of the others, that riparian forests, or floodplain forests, those forests that take advantage of the moisture that's along those rivers and streams, which is obviously why those states look like they do, right? These are states that don't have a very high rainfall, so trees need a lot of water. The trees occur where the water is along rivers and streams. So that's one of the ways that those forests provide a lot of connectivity, corridors for wildlife to move from place to place, and the water quality improvement. I think in Nebraska too, I noticed that Nebraska has a program or an agency called the Statewide Arboretum. And I think Nebraska is home to the Arbor Day Foundation, right? So planting trees has been a important part of the conservation in that state. There's plenty of sort of that similar focus and strategy in each of these. And I'm just going to head to this. This is from the Minnesota report on forests and carbon, I think is the name of it. So this is in that report that was just released last spring, maybe March or April of 23. The Minnesota DNR said these are our 3 strategies for making sure that we're managing forest carbon to the best of our ability. And these are almost the same things as CCL has as its priorities, right? I mean, retain forest cover, increase forested acres, and then manage those forests for sequestration and storage. So these messages are common across many allies in this space. Like I said, I have a little folder with a lot of the materials, and I'm happy to share that with any of you if you'd like to take a little deeper dive in that. What I would invite is any of you who've had conversations in your states and communities about healthy forests to just say a little bit about what you've done, what's worked, what challenges you faced. Alan, I think you're being. Oh, did I? Yes, Mia. Just be really loud. I'll repeat it.
And one thing that I learned about was prescribed fire for the forest, and we did a lot. We have some projects like over integration and utilizing opening up the canopy, so even taking something out of there to open up the space, or the natural, or the local forests, local plants, local trees, grasses and shrubs and things like that. So that's one thing that I didn't really know about, is that pecan fire is a really great tool for regeneration of the forest. And so that's something that I'm not sure if you're seeing that on a statewide level, if other states are taking that initiative. But I think that's something that's important, going back to the way that indigenous peoples use the land and that they were able to keep the cycle going. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely in the Oak Savanna kind of a forest setting. Yeah, and there are other forests that benefit from that too. Alan, can I invite you up to say a little bit about how you're advocating for forests in South Dakota?
Perhaps I can describe the situation in the Black Hills and maybe talk about the agency that's doing, or the group that's doing the most work.
Yeah.
And I'm involved a little bit with them. I used to work in the Black Hills National Forest for quite a while as an engineer, so I got to know the forestry problems with harvesting mostly. So the Black Hills National Forest, the ponderosa pine grows like a weed there, and it's the most productive national forest in the nation as far as timber production, believe it or not. That little bitty dot that showed up there as Black Hills grows a lot of ponderosa pine. So what's happening now, there's climate issues, but they haven't really hit the Black Hills yet, with the exception of fire. In a dry spell, we lose a lot of timber. The last 10 years or so, it's been California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia and now most of Canada that's burning up, but it used to be Black Hills, and then it started to rain. So as soon as it dries out, you're going to see smoke from the Black Hills. But the issue there now is harvesting and over-harvesting. There's timber producers that have made it political because it's their livelihood. The National Forest has done studies on what's sustainable production and harvesting. And it's quite a cut in what's going on now, or what's going on in the last few years. So they've said that we cannot maintain a sustainable forest at this level of cut, they call it, get the cut. And they've convinced the politicians from South Dakota that their numbers and their feeling about harvesting at certain levels is more important than the National Forest Service. The Forest Service has studied the productivity for the Black Hills, probably at more detail than any other forest in the United States as far as what it can produce sustainably. And they say you got to cut it in half, or we're not going to have a forest that's producing timber of a viable size in the near future. They are losing that battle with the politicians and the forest industry, but they're working on trying to turn that around. There's a group called Peter Norbeck Society in the Black Hills, and their sole purpose is to comment on forest management of the Black Hills. And they are some of the most well-informed scientists and advocates that I know of in the area. They know the Black Hills better than most people, almost, well, I would say in certain circumstances better than the specialists in the Forest Service, which is quite a bit. So that battle is going on now, and the Peter Norbeck Society is campaigning at a grassroots level to try and comment on the publicity that is being spread around the Black Hills as far as the forest industry saying that, you know, we've got to cut these trees because fire will be a problem, or it'll be a healthy forest if we cut it. But it's kind of a, you know, a misnomer. It's a white lie. Okay. Cutting the forest is of course the only way to manage that forest, because it's ponderosa pine and it grows like a weed. And if you don't run fire through it, it will overgrow and be an unhealthy forest, and then it will burn and the bugs will kill. So it's a very complicated management thing. But when you have one of the groups that's not playing the game like we did after lunch, and they have money and political influence with some very powerful U.S. senators from South Dakota, it's very hard to win that battle, because they put pressure on the National Forest Service, and the Forest Service puts pressure on the Black Hills to keep cutting. So the battle is ongoing. You can stop anytime. Battle is ongoing in the Black Hills, and who's going to win, I don't know. But I work with some of the groups that support Peter Norbeck Society, and helping them publicize at a grassroots level, and to gather information that they might use to challenge the Forest Service. Unfortunately, is caught in the middle, challenge the Forest Service to do what they say they do in the Forest Management Plan, which is to manage these areas in very specific ways. And they are outside of that management plan now, and they will be way outside of it in the near future. And they're in the process of writing a new Forest Management Plan, which will update, I think I've got a 20-year-old plan that tells the public how they intend to manage the plan or the forest. So I don't know where this is going to go. Water's an issue, fire's an issue, disease is an issue, climate change is an issue. But the fight at the Washington level, I think, involves mostly political influence. Unfortunately, one company that wants to not reduce its size, which is all it would take. They still need to, the Forest Service needs that company. It's complicated. They need that company to manage the forest, to harvest the trees, to keep it healthy. But if you overharvest it, it becomes unhealthy. If you underharvest it, it becomes unhealthy. And the debate is what's healthy. And so it's another battle.
Well, I appreciate the work that you've done to be in the middle of that battle. I think we see some of that in Minnesota with the struggle about just exactly what, I mean, Minnesota adopted a sustainable forestry plan with spent a lot of time and money getting that number right. Are you raising your hand?
I am.
Yes.
A question, if you can go back to that map of the whole United States. When I was in middle school or maybe ninth grade, and we had a geography textbook, that area with North Dakota, South Dakota, all the way down to Texas, was described on the map as the Great American Desert. And so what I'm wondering is, how related is it in terms of the reintroduction of natural grasslands and prairie grass into the areas away from the rivers where the trees aren't going to grow anyhow? Can you comment on that?
So my first piece of advice is to show up tomorrow morning in the session that Becky Phillips will be doing. She's going to be talking a lot about the role of grasslands in carbon storage and cycling. That's one point. I think it's interesting that, like, these are arid places, right? Compared to the east of the Mississippi, these are more arid. And I'm sure there are deserts there, but that great big prairie grassland is not a desert. It's a prairie, right? It's a prairie with a tremendous amount of diversity in the plant life and the wildlife. So one of the things we need to do is appreciate, like, learn to, when you have a chance to take a walk on a prairie, everything in the prairie is, it's subtle, right? You have to be looking for the changes, but the role that native grasslands or reintroduced grasslands or at least perennial cover would make to that area. The once you're cultivating land that could be under perennial cover, you're releasing carbon and you're on the way to emissions, right? When you're accelerating emissions. So we've opened up a tremendous amount of that land to emissions.
To further comments on that, I wanted to bring up prairie restoration and prairie preservation, given that we're in the Great Plains right now.
Yes.
And it's something that it's very accessible. In Sioux Falls, there was a college student who just put together this program where she made kits that would allow people to replace parts of their yard with native grasses, which is great for water usage. Prairie grasses, in contrast to like crops and turf grass, prairie grasses have roots that go like 10 feet under the ground. It helps with water retention, it helps with sequestration. And now that program has been adopted by the city, and it would be great to see things like that pop up elsewhere.
Yes, native landscaping, whether that's done on your city lot, on your acreage, on your field. We also depend on this part of the country to provide a whole lot of food for people and animals across the world. So these are the trade-offs and the struggles that we're in the midst of facing. Did I see another hand? Munez.
So, first of all, thanks for the presentation. I noticed that in Iowa, action plan was mentioned about carbon storage and sequestration, which I found interesting, like usually called carbon sequestration.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're gonna store that and sequester.
I just probably said it out of order. Okay. Yeah.
So that, my question is not specifically about the afforestation, but it's about like the healthy parts. So is there any direct relationship between the healthy parts and the wildfires?
And wildfires. So there are people who are forest fire ecologists, right? Because fire has been part of forest landscapes since they became forest landscapes. There's also, jump in and help me whenever you want to, Brad. Recently, in Minnesota, the U.S. or the extension foresters have been working with Fond du Lac Nation to look at places that the Fond du Lac people for hundreds, maybe thousands of years used control burns, not to manage the forest, but to manage the berries and the foods that they got out of the forest, right? So there's the influences on what we now see as our forest are millennia in the making. Some caused by local climate, weather events, some caused by the human interaction with those forests over time. Yeah.
I think what is really interesting, and it's the place that we're in, is that, with the extremes of the hydrologic cycle, that even a healthy forest will burn up, no problem. And so now we're in this situation where, how do you manage that? And so, and I will just say this, that, in Minnesota, what we're looking at is, you know, woody biomass can be used in advanced, next generation biofuels. And so what they're eyeing with much glee is the opportunity for sustainable aviation fuel. If that's what you like. So I'm really challenged by that because and we've been talking some with other folks here that, you know, it was real interesting the way that bar on En-ROADS, when you slid it, you know, biofuels raises the, you know, in which, you know, so as I participate in these conversations with the Minnesota folks, and I have to say that I'm pretty much Debbie Downer to the conversation because it's kind of a reality check on, but do we want to be part of the solution or do we want to be part of the problem? And, you know, in my view, not everybody wants to fly in a jet airplane. But another opportunity that I see as, you know, and I introduce it into the conversation whenever I can, but it's, you know, the conversion of coal facilities to wood. I mean, and there's, you know, it's still in the infancy stage, but it's an opportunity to go in and do those management practices that reduce, even in a healthy forest, you know, the risk of fire. And you know, bioenergy, you know, a combusted product with carbon capture and storage, you know, has the potential to be negative emissions. And in the world of, you know, in the conversation of carbon, we really have to, I mean, getting to net zero is only part of the problem, or the challenge, I'll say. I mean, because we're beyond the limit. So we have to, I mean, direct air capture takes electricity. Bioenergy with carbon capture, you have the opportunity to make electricity, renewable, baseload electricity, and you can capture the carbon and put it away. And in the right process, you can do a really good job of forest management, and you have these other values.
I think one more question.
I've read a lot of more study again on trees, and it's just amazing. The whole thing talking about carbon capture. The first thing the world wants to carry around. I don't know, use moisture, which is carbon, which holds soil, holds moisture. They're finding out the more carbon you can have in the soil, the less likely these hard rains are going to cause flooding. But the trees, it's amazing. I lived with this for a long time. They see up to 60% of a tree is below the ground. So when you're talking about storing carbon, and they take the top of the tree off, or it dies in odds, a lot of it goes down. But just growing the tree and leaving the roots, as grasses do it also, because they leave a tremendous amount of carbon in the roots like bounds.
Yeah, the forest carbon pools are huge, and keeping forest land forested, I mean, that doesn't mean you can't harvest trees. That just means it has to continue to be a forest, is really important.
I'm not sure what you know, and actually, see, I think this conversation should be about natural landscapes, including grasslands, and you know that because you know, I would say that in many of these states that we're talking about, north winds, land conversion, forest conversion, grasslands conversions it's a problem. You know, that's where the biodiversity hangs out, is in those natural landscapes. And you know, it's really, I'm just sharing my challenge here because I just see the urgency, and to me it's like this amazing opportunity in restoration, and you see how this kind of magic works when systems come back and function, and you know, healthy rivers save communities, and you know, floods spread out, and there is there's just so much need for us to be really concerned about carbon and biodiversity and the proper activities on any given landscape that get us to the right end. And like Alan speaks of the Black Hills, you know, the fires in Canada, you know, so the carbon emissions from the fire this year, 355 megatons or million tons of carbon emitted. So such a big deal. And this is, you know, we're kind of at the front end of this period of time. And then if you understand a little bit more about, you know, what the boreal forest that exists in Canada, right? It's unique in that it's one of these big carbon sinks. And it became a carbon sink because of the cold. You know, it lays on it. I think about 40% of the forest is on top of permafrost. It's the insulating layer above the permafrost. And so these fires it's really highly organic materials, and these fires are burning deep into the ground. I mean, so all of that legacy carbon that's stored in these systems, you know, and it's it's just really a risky period of time for any forest, but those you know, these systems that are really unique because they store so much carbon. And so it's a big lift. There's no question. But I mean, it's interesting because there are opportunities in that as well. And so I just think it's really important, but it's certainly in the state of Minnesota, Alan is exactly right. The industries, they've got a lot of, they've achieved a lot of power. A lot of the small industry has fallen away, and they are in the driver's seat. And so we just have to be really aware of that and know that, you know, they're looking at dollars, no question.
We're happy to hang around and talk about questions, but we're 5 minutes into our break time already. So I'm going to say thank you very much for attending this workshop.